Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, whatever time it is in your places. I'm delighted that you join us again in the second edition of the DIGI talk. This time we're going to talk about AI, the topic at the recent WEF and probably in many of the media that you also follow. We're going to hold it in English today. It was also one of your feedbacks that it's easier for everyone also in the field of FDFA to follow. Hence, that's why we are doing it today in English. I'm delighted to have here at my side Professor El-Assady, a professor of ETH Zurich and an AI expert. I'm going to deep more into what is an AI expert in general. The goal of today is really that you hopefully after the 30 minutes can walk or turn away with having a broader understanding what we mean when we talk about AI that goes a bit beyond the buzzword, and that you also have an idea about the risks and challenges, but also, and most importantly, about enormous opportunities that AI can bring us in general as humans, but also to Switzerland and our work as diplomats for the Swiss Foreign Ministry. So that's going to be more or less the three topics that we're going to talk about today. I'm going to call you Menna. I hope that's okay, because we're also friends. We've also been together in some conferences. Thank you so much for coming here and sharing some of your knowledge and research with the colleagues. It's from all over the world, Swiss Foreign Ministry employees that are listening to us and would like to learn a bit more on AI. I mentioned it before. We actually wanted to put here like a book or something about AI, and we kind of completely failed. You can see that. That's like nothing but a laptop. And I think that's quite a good image, because it's difficult to grasp what is AI. So could you explain us a bit about, is all the same when we talk about ChatGPT or a laptop, or how can we understand a bit better this terminology?
Yeah. So thanks, Nina, again for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here and also to talk to everyone. So when we talk about AI, and the recent hype is basically originating from a specific class of machine learning models. And these are models that can actually feed on a lot of data. So they look at, for example, all of the text on the internet or a lot of images that are annotated and try to figure out what are patterns in these data so that we can learn something from them. Machine learning as a field has been around for many, many years, but there are different classes of models. So there are models that maybe don't need a lot of data and that may be explainable so that we can follow along a decision path and we can say, okay, if this happens, then this is the decision. If this happens, then this is the decision. And then there are other models that we call deep learning models that are bigger, that feed on a lot of data, that take also a lot of time and a lot of energy to train, and that try to kind of extract patterns from either text data or image data, and basically allow us to kind of have different applications down the line. The recent hype of AI has been generated by these types of models, these larger models that require a lot of data. And you asked me earlier the difference between like an image-based AI model versus a text-based AI model. They are indeed completely different. They feed on a lot of different types of data, but the tendency now is going towards multimodal AI, which means that we train an AI model with multiple sources of data and try to kind of use all of these sources in an aligned way so that we can ask a question, for example, give me a caption about this image, or what is this video describing, and this and that, that kind of combine multiple modalities.
So it gets more and more complex, if I understand it. I do also hear from you that basically when we talk about artificial intelligence, it's basically a reproductions of pattern, which is in a way a philosophical questions about our own intelligence. Are we also a product of patterns? Is that correct, that it's basically a sequencing or just continuation of sequencing?
So most of the AI models that we are familiar with, that we use kind of on a day-to-day basis, are basically analyzing different attributes within our data. So for example, different words, different features in a table, different attributes of an image, like maybe a specific figure or something. And they're trying to detect commonalities. And based on these commonalities, they basically allow us to answer specific sets of tasks. And these tasks are being described in a way that the AI actually learns them, for example, from instructions. So in a language model that powers ChatGPT, we have a lot of pairs of instructions that this model goes through. If the model was asked this and that question, this is what it should answer, and then it learns from this data to actually predict the next word or to understand the specific set of language instructions that it's given.
Okay, thank you. It just comes to my mind now that I did forget to tell the colleagues who are listening to that if you have questions or comments, like a prompting, you can also prompt us or me. You can send either a comment or you can send a direct message through Skype to my colleague Roman Hunziker, who will then forward it to me, so you can actually then talk through us to Menna, who will then of course also answer your questions. Yeah. So to come back to this prompting in a way, I think if you followed probably since the launch of ChatGPT, when like AI came a bit into the
public focus,
public focus, as you can say. I always call it like the iPhone moment, where finally like smartphones come to us. There's also been a lot of talk about like risks and possibilities, obviously. But I would like first probably to talk a bit more on the risk sides. Some talk about that, like the world's gonna end. There has been this open ladder, and I always get the feeling it's a bit fussy. Like, would you mind sharing with us, probably a bit more in detail, the more like devised, what are the concrete risks, or what can go wrong with AI, or what does already go wrong, probably?
Yeah. So as I said, AI basically is trained, like AI models, machine learning models, large language models like that power ChatGPT are trained on a large set of data. And the data is coming from all the sources that we know of, like on the internet, like different forums, different chats and so on. And this data might not be intended for that type of training. It might not be clean enough and so on and so forth. So there is a whole set of risks that come from just training on this large set of data without actually taking a closer look whether they are actually meant to represent the world that we live in. So I might want to show you something. So over here, if we can take a look, is basically one way to look into these large language models. We've been working on that even before they were cool, and now we can actually share this information with you. So this is an interface that we built for linguists, and if we wanted to see the risk of having biased data in a model, we can see that, for example, based on what the model thinks are properties of that are associated with female and male pronouns. So if we ask the model about different job titles that are associated with females and males, and we go here through the different layers of the model and what it has learned, you see that it basically says that women are blonde housekeepers and receptionists, and males are maybe football players that are strong and so on. So these are patterns that this model has learned based on our data. Now, this is a risk because we are trying to kind of train these very expensive models, and then these represent the world for us when we make decisions. So the question here is like, what type of data do we want to have reflected in these models? And what types of decisions do we make based on these characteristics? In that particular prototype, the simplest way I can show you this is based on male and female prototypes, just binary gender, but actually we built it based on many other characteristics. So you can have any segmentations of any demographic and just ask this tool to show you what has the model learned and how biased is it about this aspect.
So you could also, just to understand it better, you could obviously, I understand that's the easiest about the two genders, but you could also ask about a certain nationality or a certain profession or just a group of people?
For example.
Okay.
And I can show you another tool where we can go a little bit deeper into the model. So if we wanted to actually not just have a prompt and get an answer, but we want to see what are all of the different options that the model has considered before giving you that answer, one of the things that we do is try to reveal all of its decision making. So we require open models for this, but like in that particular example, we've asked the model a prompt that says, after receiving their degree, a specific person, and we're replacing this with a male or female name, wants to become a, and then we let it continue the sentence. And of course, the men want to become doctors and lawyers and engineers, and the women want to become actresses and nurses and so on. So there's a lot of inherent bias here. My question is, like, what do we want to actually have represented? This is not really a technical problem. It is a societal problem that we need to ask ourselves. It's a problem of representation. We have, and I'll just jump to one last example. We had a project with some students in a course where we were looking at the distribution of different professions according to the US Census. So how many more men are engineers than women, and how many more women are nurses than men? So just like the actual distribution of these professions. Right. And if you then take the prediction that the model gives you and you look at the actual profession, you will find that the model is reflecting some of the bias that is actually present in the real world. So we have a lot more nurses that are women, and the model thinks the same. And we have a lot more engineers that are men, and the model thinks that. So the question here is, like, what do we actually want the model to learn? Do we want it to learn the real representation, or some idealistic view of the world where we have gender parity for the different jobs? This is not a technical problem anymore.
I see that, and obviously it's an interesting question about how do you want it to be. I could ask, but why is it the problem? I mean, is it just if I use like ChatGPT and it might continue the sentence a bit in a way that I would then have to adapt if we talk about football and it's actually about the female football world champion. But I understand that it becomes more tricky in certain applications. Is that correct? And maybe you can explain it more on why such a data bias in, I don't know, be it in health or others, could become an issue.
Yeah. So I think, like, if it is something that we can observe and correct for, there might be an easy technical solution for it. But we cannot do that for any segmentation of any demographic and any combination of the different characteristics, right? So if we have specific subgroups that are underrepresented either in the data, because there aren't a lot of data available for these subgroups, or if we have a specific set of variables that is not as commonly present, these then become challenges for these types of models that are trying to generalize as much as possible. So in domains such as high-risk domains, medical care, high-risk decision-making, financial decision-making, and so on, you don't want these models to just like overgeneralize based on the most common patterns, based on the most common aspects in a population, specifically because we know that a lot of the data that we have available is very, very Western-centric, very US-centric. So we need to have more representative data. We need to actually look into different characteristics that we want to have as decision-making factors. And this is why also in all of the research that we do, we try to strive for explainability. We try to explain the decision-making patterns and explain what we have learned in order to figure out, is that actually something that we want to base decisions on or not. So that's a very common risk when using AI, but it's something that researchers are working on to kind of tackle this with explainability, to tackle this with basically revealing the patterns that these models have trained on, and to try to pose these questions for people that are using them.
Well, thank you so much. Is there, maybe I'm just looking the watch, whether we have still time to talk about the risks, because I do want to have some time to talk about the opportunities as well. I mean, there's obviously also many other challenges, I guess, right? When it comes to a job market or others. What do you think is the most challenging at the moment, or I think at the WEF, for instance, many talked about the risk of misinformation and the fake news, etc. Is this something realistic?
Of course, yeah. So some of the challenges right now, at least when we talk about language models specifically, is that they tend to hallucinate. The architectures that we're using right now for language models is prone to actually providing just the next word that is most probable, but not the next information that is actually proven to be a fact. I will very, very briefly show you an example. And here what we see is basically a model such as like behind ChatGPT and others. So this is an InstructGPT model. And we're asking it to generate a biography. And instead of asking the model to generate one biography, we asked it the same question 20 times. And we then compare the facts or the claims that it generated, and you will see that some of them are actually completely contradictory. So the year that this person is supposed to have been born in, or its their nationality and so on, some of these facts are always the same, and some of the facts are contradictory, so they cannot live in the same world. So having the model understand semantics, having the model refer to facts, having the model actually use causality as the way to make decisions is are open research questions. There are lots of people who are working on this. There are lots of new projects coming out that are trying to kind of ground the knowledge in specific knowledge graphs and stuff like that. But right now, at least the open models, they are prone to hallucinations. They are prone to also generate misinformation as long as you give them the right prompt. So this is one of the challenges that we will be facing in the near future, but that I assume will have a solution at some point. So it's not something that is not solvable, but we are still doing research on trying to solve this.
The problem about hallucination, not a problem about being used by bad actors to create fake news. So it's two different things, right?
Exactly. So when we are talking about these aspects, and this is what we also experience in Davos, we have a lot of different problems that we can't find technical solutions for. But then if you use these models, and this is like this dual usage issue, if you use these models for a bad use case, you actually cannot always guarantee that this will never be used for these use cases. So this is why we need regulations. We need to guarantee that these use cases are not the things that people use them for and so on. And there's a lot of talk happening about these issues at the moment. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. I would like to slowly switch to the good sides, the more positive sides. I think you mentioned before that when we talked about the biases, it's a problem, if I understand it correctly. It's basically because the system are kind of a black box, right? Yeah. So you don't know what's really in the box. Yeah. And I understood that if you would know that the data is actually not representing a biased world, as unfortunately we are living in, but a more idealistic world, that could create a lot of positive outcomes. So would you mind sharing some of the, I know you also work on many positive outcomes of AI. Yes, would you mind sharing some of your research, but probably also from your colleagues from AI Center?
Of course,
what's the idealistic scenarios where AI can do good?
Yeah, so I think like we have a lot of potential here at our hands. If we actually use the AI models that are at our disposal in a setup where we can benefit from what they can do, for example, large-scale pattern analysis and helping us like desegment different data sets and so on and so forth, then we have a lot of use cases where we can use them. My research is on human AI collaboration, and one of the core aspects here is to try to triage the different tasks that we want to give to humans and the tasks that we want to give to AIs, and the ones where they need to share something in common. So, for example, one of the projects that we're working on with the AI Center is looking to help in conflict regions. We help the UN with their data in conflict regions to gather the right type of data, to maybe gather the right types of reports, and we're looking looking into whether we can predict different conflict events, whether we can look into specific preventable aspects about conflicts. We work a lot on topics related to social good and climate change and stuff like that, where AI can help us basically navigate a large data space, where it helps us analyze specific patterns, make specific conclusions, and so on. I myself work a lot with political scientists, for example, to analyze political debate, to look into argumentation patterns, and I can show that in a minute if that makes sense. And then also a lot of applications where we work, for example, with doctors, where we are trying to figure out whether we can capture the way doctors, for example, operate, expert doctors can operate on patients, capture their knowledge, their expertise, and basically create educational material for lay people, for doctors that are still learning, to give them feedback about what they're doing. So this can be used, for example, in places where we don't have access to experts. So there's a lot of different applications that we're working on, and a lot of them basically try to bring humans and AIs together in order to have them team up in the best way possible.
So when you mean like bring them together, it's basically having AI as an assistant or as a like a tool in a way, right? To be used by humans. That's correct.
Exactly. So we often model AI decision making as an agent in a system that is basically intervening in the process of analysis. This is like very high level, so I will show you briefly what we do. So imagine you're analyzing a political debate and you are trying to figure out in which topic does a specific piece of text belong. So you're just trying to figure out, okay, is this like a topic on taxes or a topic on women's rights and so on, and you're just trying to segment that. One way we can use AI models is that we basically give suggestions during that analysis and receive feedback from the users in order to figure out is that the right way to segment data or not. So we're trying to teach these AI models when they are useful. And here is a political debate between Romney and Obama, and we can see the different text pieces coming in. And then we can see these agents basically making an intervention. They're stopping the analysis and asking us, do you think that these topics should belong together? And then instead of having to read everything, you can go and try to figure out why did they make this decision and just give feedback. Yes, I think they belong together. And then we move on to the next decision-making point, and then we get another suggestion. So here's another suggestion coming in, and then we can see, does this look like a good suggestion or not? And if we don't like it, we can give the feedback to the model, no, we want to reject this suggestion. And we can keep going on, and the models in the background, these AI agents, they learn based on the interaction or the non-interaction, so they lose confidence when we don't interact with them.
Oh.
And
what do they do if they lose confidence?
They learn basically whether in that particular context of the analysis their suggestion is useful, or whether in the future they shouldn't make that suggestion.
Okay.
And based on these interactions, we can actually train the models to help us automate specific things that we always click on. And we always say, yes, I accept that, so we can automate it away.
Like the cookies.
For example. And then we can focus on the things that we actually want to focus on, that we actually want to concentrate our analysis or our own time on. And this is one way AI can give us a huge opportunity to actually focus on the things that we like to see.
But what does that mean? Because if I look at not a political debate, but I just think about the work we do at the Swiss Foreign Ministry, obviously I see huge opportunities that how AI could help us. Yeah. Would that mean that we would first need to kind of train an AI every time with this how do you call it, like naming, yes, I like that, or not? Yeah. Or is this something that you can kind of buy from the shelf that's already done? What do you think?
So I think for some scenarios, we will have models, or we will have different interfaces that we can just use, right? Like they have been trained on this particular use case, they have been trained on this particular data, we can use off the shelf. But for some aspects, we will probably want to fine-tune them to our own understanding. So say I've given you a model like that, and I told you, like it's been trained on all of the different political debates in the US. And now you want to use that exact model for political debates in Switzerland. So maybe you want to adjust it a little bit to make it more adapt to nuances in these political debates.
Right.
This will not be the same as training it completely from scratch. but it would require a little bit of adaptation. And what we are researching are the different ways you can put human feedback to the model so that it can learn your preferences or your understanding of a topic.
I understand. That brings me to just checking whether we forgot important topics that we wanted to talk about. But that brings me a bit to an initiative that I would really like that you could present that still to the audience. That also talks a bit about training from scratch. And that's like the Swiss AI initiative. That's then also being part of a joint initiative of ours. Would you mind sharing, because I think we can be particularly proud, the Swiss, to be honestly of having this Alps. Would you mind explaining to the colleagues here who might not have heard about the Swiss AI and what exactly is it and what's the aim of it, what's behind and what's Alps?
So thanks for bringing this up. So Swiss AI is a huge opportunity for us because the work that we do in order to explain AI decision making, for example, what I showed you earlier, in order to kind of figure out which decisions does the model take in order to show you what you actually see at the end, how biased is the model, all of these aspects require us to not just have access to the output of the model, but also to all of its training data and all of its decision making, so we can actually look into the model and try to explain it, try to research it and make it more safe and to try to power a lot more applications with it. Now, these models are very expensive to train. They require a lot of resources, storage space, a lot of power in order to access all of this data, all of the text data that we need, all of the image data that we need, put them into a training, train it for a very long time, and then get one of these large models out. Right now, the state of research is hinging on having access to models that are provided by different big tech companies. A couple of years ago, they were providing a lot of open source models. But now we have this space where there's a lot of economic opportunities and a lot of the companies are closing off their models. So with Swiss AI...
I have to interrupt you because maybe it's not clear when you mean closing versus open. Could you just explain that before Swiss AI?
Of course. So having access to what data the model's trained on and having access to the actual decision-making points of the model, the different ways of the models and so on, like the actual internal workings of such AI models, allows us to reveal things like you see on the screen with these decision-making points. So having access to this type of information requires us to be able to look into them. Companies nowadays, if they don't open source their model, they just provide us with a way to provide input, like you type in your prompt, and the output, the text that is being generated. That's it. Right. But you don't have a way to look into the model, the decisions that it took, all of the different alternatives, the different parameters that it looked at in order to get to whatever decision it took. So we as researchers, we need to look into these things in order to be able to provide you the access that we have in these interfaces. So as it comes right now with the companies closing off their models and the research landscape being really needing to rely on these types of big tech companies that have access to this, we have a huge problem researching it. And this is why in Switzerland right now with Swiss AI and the Alps project having access to very, very large servers, to very efficient and high-scale computing power is a huge privilege. And now we can actually sit down as researchers and try to train open source models based on specific data that we know, based on specific modalities that we want to look into, and then research how these models perform without having to being granted access through a specific company and so on. And the Swiss AI project will do that and will open source all of the models that we have trained for us and for other researchers to contribute. And this particular project is kind of being driven here in Switzerland with ETH and EPFL, but it also have ramifications on other locations that have these types of computing power available and then want to foster open science. So then we are connecting with them, for example, through ICANN and the other initiatives where we want to basically make an open landscape for research into these models and for applications for social good. So this is where we stand at the moment, and it's very exciting to be here and work on this at this right time.
It really is, because to underline that more, is we do have with the Alps, so Alps, just for the audience who don't know that, it's like the Swiss Supercomputing Center that's located close to Lugano, right? And they have invested in the specific chips that are needed to train these models, and we are now, it is now like one of the most powerful supercomputing, I've read like one of the most powerful supercomputing center in the world. I assume from a public institutions, right? But still, so that's really fantastic news, and exactly. I'm very much looking forward to the projects. I have obviously many ideas for projects that could also be done for the Swiss administration to make our work more efficient. But we can talk to that afterwards. We've already come to an end. I'm looking at my colleague and also into my phone to see if there's been any questions. There's 2 questions. I unfortunately do not see them. It somehow didn't work. So would you mind sending them or showing me the questions? I'm so sorry for the wait, but now it's kind of, it seems very interesting to see what the questions are, but I would like to be able to answer that. Just give me the laptop and I can read it. I take the laptop. Thank you so much. You see, we're still humans here in the, actually in the DIGI here. So there was a question, which is basic from my colleague in Berlin, and he thanks, so thank you also. And he says, are you aware of any examples in international relations where hallucinations of AI models led to detrimental consequences in the real world? Very interesting point. So to actually have a damage in the, a damage consequence.
Very interesting question, and thank you for that. I'm not aware of immediate, examples or anything, but I can imagine that happening. So I can imagine, for example, in elections, we have a lot of elections coming up this year, that a lot of the fake news and the misinformation is amplified by the ability to generate such large amounts of text. I'm not aware that this has happened already, but there's a lot more bots that are generating text, a lot more bots that are using also sophisticated argumentation patterns. So it's not just about generating text per se, but also generating convincing text based on a specific echo chamber in which they are operating. So linking specific beliefs, specific pieces of misinformation and presenting them as the truth. So I think deep fakes, misinformation, all of these things will happen and will have a real world impact. I'm not aware of one specific instance, but I don't think that we're far away from these things having an effect.
I think one example that comes to my mind, Jonas, is it's not as in in a war, but it's it was a very concrete case where unfortunately a lawyer used ChatGPT to write a speech in a tribunal case, and he hallucinated, and he didn't double check, he didn't fact check, and he had obviously very money-wise damages for his client because he lost the case. And I think he also lost his license, by the way. So the second question is from a colleague, Simon. She said also she thanks you, and she asks, from an economic point of view, we expect AI to make companies more productive by taking over repetitive processes. There are, however, also some voices that say AI will generate even more bureaucracy. Yes. What is your take on that?
So I think right now we're in this landscape of trying to figure out how to regulate AI and how to put on specific red lines for use cases that we don't want to have present, but also enable the use of AI so that we can empower people to be more productive and so on. And I think right now we can actually not say how the bureaucracy will develop, but I'm assuming as soon as we actually regulate a lot of these use cases that we have to jump through a lot of hoops in order to use AI. I personally don't think that this is a bad thing for now, because there is still a lot of open research that needs to be done at the moment, and just having a blank check use of AI at the moment without the bureaucracy and without jumping the hoops might not be the best way forward. But maybe in the future we will have some sort of regulation bodies or some sort of like checking bodies and so on that can actually already give us some sort of safety checks for specific types of models or data or use cases. Right now it's a very dynamically evolving space, I would say, and I think like there's also a lot of discussion. We had these in Davos as well, where we were looking at what is the best model to go forward, and I'm assuming that we will have to jump through bureaucracy and then back to something maybe that is less bureaucratic.
Yeah, but it's an interesting point of view. I've never looked at it from that way. But thank you so much. Thank you also so much to the audience. I hope I didn't miss now a question. We are still, clearly is room for improvement for how we deal with the comments and questions. This has only been our second Digi talk, so thank you so much for having listened to. Thank you so much, Professor, for having come. It was specifically important to me to have this talk about AI because I really do think, and I'm looking really also at the colleagues abroad, I do think that Switzerland should be more on the global map when we talk about AI. When it comes to the chances, there's enormous knowledge in Switzerland specifically, I think at the ETH and also at EPFL and other universities, of course. I think there's the most AI patents per capita do come from Switzerland. And there's obviously International Geneva that we also always have to mention. You mentioned the AI governance, that's like now taking a big movement. There's many of the international organizations that are in Geneva that are actually dealing with these different challenges. IP law, we didn't talk about at all, but it's like IP, International Labour Organizations and many others. And of course the joint initiatives that we have when it comes to kind of a CERN-like organization for AI, like the ICANN, and I'm very happy that we can continue working together, and I also hope that we could raise some interest for AI topics, and I think Professor El-Assady and her team and her colleagues are for sure also great guests if you do some events at your embassy. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much to the colleagues behind the cameras and behind the screens for all the work, and thank you for your interest. The next Digi Talk will be the 25th of March when we do talk about a related topic, obviously cybersecurity, equally important, and its role for humanitarian work. Thank you so much. That was it.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.